There is a theory in psychology that says identical twins separated at birth will still find each other. Not through searching, not through records or DNA databases or social media, but through something older than all of that. Something that lives in the blood and moves through the world like a quiet current pulling two magnets toward each other across impossible distances. Scientists call it nature versus nurture. Twins call it something they cannot explain. But what happens when that current pulls two men toward each other, and one of them is wearing a badge, and the other is wearing a target? What happens when the hunter and the hunted share the same face, the same hands, the same voice, the same birthday, the same mother who gave them away on the same cold February morning 34 years ago and never looked back? Before we dive into this story, if you are new here, welcome. This channel is where the darkest and most gripping crime mysteries live. If you enjoy stories that keep you up at night and make you question everything, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications so you never miss a story. And if you are already part of this family, thank you. Now let's get into it. This is the story of Nathan Cole and Eli Voss. Two men born together, raised apart, shaped by different hands into different weapons. And the night they finally stood in the same room, the night the hunter looked into the face of the hunted and saw himself looking back, neither of them was prepared for what the truth would cost. This is their story. And it begins, like most stories about brothers, with a choice someone else made before either of them was old enough to understand what a choice could destroy. Nathan Cole had been chasing the same ghost for 3 years. He was 34 years old, lean and sharp-featured, with dark eyes that never fully switched off and the kind of stillness that made suspects uncomfortable in interview rooms. He had been with the Harlow City Criminal Investigation Division for 8 years. He had closed 41 cases. He had a reputation for being relentless, difficult, and almost always right. His colleagues called him methodical. His captain called him obsessive. His ex-wife had called him unreachable. Nathan called himself focused. The case that had consumed the last 3 years of his life had a name in the department files. The Voss killings. 6 victims across 4 cities. No consistent weapon. No DNA at any scene. No witnesses who survived. No clear motive connecting the victims except one thread so thin most investigators had dismissed it entirely. Every victim had been involved, at some point in their lives, in the state foster care system. Not as children. As adults. As workers. Caseworkers. Administrators. One judge. One psychologist. One facility director. People who had held power over children. People who had made decisions that shaped young lives. People who had, in Nathan's studied opinion, done something terrible to someone who never forgot it. Nathan had built a profile over 3 years that he could recite in his sleep. Male. 30 to 40. High intelligence. Organized. Patient. Likely spent time in foster care himself. Carries deep unresolved trauma. Does not kill impulsively. Plans every detail weeks or months in advance. Feels justified. Possibly even righteous. The profile was solid. The problem was the name. The only name Nathan had was Eli Voss. A ghost name. A shadow name. It appeared once on a motel registration 3 days before the 3rd victim was found. It appeared once more on a rental car agreement 2 states away. And once on a burner phone call to the 4th victim's office the morning before she died. Eli Voss. The name meant nothing to any database Nathan had searched. No criminal record. No driver's license. No social security trail beyond a single registration that dead-ended at a foster care facility in rural Pennsylvania that had closed 15 years ago. Nathan had driven to that facility himself. He had stood in the overgrown parking lot of a boarded-up building and looked at the rusted sign above the entrance. Hargrove House. A home for children. Something had moved through him standing there. Something he could not name. He had dismissed it as the cold November wind. He had been wrong. Eli Voss had been running for 3 years. Not because he was afraid. Because he was not finished. He was 34 years old, lean and sharp-featured, with dark eyes that never fully switched off and the kind of stillness that made people in diners and bus stations subtly move away from him without understanding why. He had been in 14 cities in 3 years. He had held 19 different jobs. He had used 7 different names. But he always came back to Eli Voss when it mattered. Because Eli Voss was the only name that was truly his. Everything else had been given to him by systems and strangers and the rotating door of foster homes he had passed through from the age of 3 days old until he was 17 and walked out of Hargrove House in rural Pennsylvania with $40, a garbage bag of clothes, and a list he had been keeping since he was 9 years old. The list had 12 names on it when he started. 6 remained. Eli did not think of himself as a killer. He thought of himself as a correction. The people on his list had not simply made mistakes. They had made choices. Deliberate, documented, defended choices that had destroyed children who had no voice and no advocate and no one standing between them and the worst that adults could do. Eli had been one of those children. And he had survived. Not everyone on his list could say the same about the children in their care. Room 7 at Hargrove House. That was where it had started. That was where a man named Director Harold Brent had run a facility that took state money for children it warehoused rather than protected. Where caseworkers signed off on conditions they never witnessed. Where a psychologist named Dr. Patricia Morse had written glowing evaluations of a facility she visited twice a year for 45 minutes each time. Eli had been in Room 7 for 4 years. He did not talk about what happened in Room 7. He had never talked about it to anyone. But he had written it down. Every detail. Every date. Every name. And when he was 31 years old and read a newspaper article about Director Harold Brent receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award from the State Foster Care Commission, Eli had put down his coffee cup, folded the newspaper carefully, and made a decision. Harold Brent had been the first name crossed off the list. Nathan was reviewing case files at 2 a.m. in his apartment when his phone rang. The caller was Detective Sasha Reeves, his partner, 10 years on the job and the only person in the department who could tolerate Nathan's hours. "We have another one," she said. Nathan was already standing. "Where?" "Meridian City. Victim is a former foster care administrator named Gerald Holt. Retired 8 years ago. Found in his study." "How?" Sasha paused. "Same signature." Nathan's jaw tightened. The signature was something the department had kept from the press. At every scene, the killer left something behind. Not a trophy. Not a taunt. A photograph. A small printed photograph of a child. Always different. Always a child between the ages of 5 and 10. Always looking directly at the camera with an expression that was not quite fear and not quite sadness but something that lived between the two. Nathan had identified 4 of the 7 children in the photographs. All 4 had been in the care of the victim at some point. All 4 had experienced documented incidents of abuse or neglect that had been investigated and quietly buried. 3 of the 4 were dead. 1 had disappeared at 17 and never been found. Nathan stared at his case board. "I'm driving to Meridian," he said. "It's 4 hours." "I know." He was already reaching for his keys. Then his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. He almost ignored it. Something made him open it. 4 words. "You should stop looking." Nathan stared at the screen. In 3 years, Eli Voss had never made contact. Never sent a message. Never acknowledged the investigation. Never done anything that suggested he was aware of Nathan specifically. Until tonight. Nathan typed back 1 word. "Why?" The response came in under 30 seconds. "Because you won't like what you find." Nathan looked at the message for a long time. Then he typed again. "Are you Eli Voss?" This time the response took longer. 2 full minutes passed. Then, "That depends on who's asking." Nathan looked at the screen and felt something move through him that he could not name. Detective Nathan Cole. Harlow CID. "I've been looking for you for 3 years. Another pause. Then the message that changed everything. "I know. I've been watching you for 2. Hold on, before we go any further. If this story is already pulling you in and you want to see more like it, drop a comment below and let me know what you think is about to happen next. And if you haven't already, hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second and it helps this story reach more people who deserve to hear it. Now back to Nathan and the message that just changed everything. The messages continued for 6 days. Not confessions. Not threats. Something stranger. Eli Voss asked Nathan questions. Not about the case. About Nathan. Where did you grow up? What was your first memory? Do you have brothers or sisters? Were you ever in the system? Nathan answered some and ignored others. But the questions unsettled him in a way he could not explain professionally. They felt less like interrogation and more like recognition. On the fourth day, Nathan asked directly, "Why are you asking me these things?" Eli's response came back immediately this time. "Because I think you already know the answer and you're afraid to look at it." Nathan sat very still at his desk. Then he did something he had been avoiding for 3 years. He pulled up the file on Hargrove House. Not the facility records. Not the abuse reports. Not the financial investigations. The intake records. Children admitted to Hargrove House between its opening in 1989 and its closure in 2009. Nathan had looked at these records before. But this time he searched differently. He searched for admissions from February 34 years ago. Infant admissions. There were 2. Both admitted on the same day. Both listed as male. Both listed as newborns. Both transferred from the same county hospital. One name, Baby Voss. One name, Baby Doe, transferred to Harlow County Foster Services. Nathan stared at the screen. His hands had gone completely still on the keyboard. He had been adopted by the Cole family at 4 months old through Harlow County Foster Services. He had never known his birth name. He had never known his birth mother's name. He had never known if he had siblings. He had never asked because asking had always felt like opening a door he was not sure he wanted to walk through. Now the door had opened itself. And on the other side was a man who had left 6 bodies across 4 cities. Nathan sat in his apartment at midnight and looked at the 2 names on the screen. Baby Voss. Baby Doe. The same birthday. The same facility. The same mother who had surrendered 2 sons on the same cold February morning. Nathan picked up his phone. His fingers were not entirely steady. He typed, "Were you born at St. Catherine's Hospital in February?" He waited. The longest 4 minutes of his life. Then, "Yes." 1 word. But it landed like a building falling. Nathan typed, "So was I." The response took 7 minutes this time. 7 minutes of silence that felt like 34 years compressed into a single held breath. Then Eli Voss sent 4 words that Nathan would never forget for the rest of his life. "I know. I'm sorry." They agreed to meet in person. It took another 4 days of messages to arrange. Eli set the location, a diner in a small town called Beckett, exactly halfway between Harlow City and wherever Eli was coming from. He would not say where he was staying. Nathan agreed not to bring backup. Sasha had told him he was out of his mind. "You're meeting a serial killer alone in a diner," she said. "I'm meeting my brother," Nathan said. Sasha stared at him. "Nathan." "I know. You cannot just." "Sasha." He looked at her. "I know." She had driven him to the edge of town in silence and told him she would be parked outside Beckett with backup in 20 minutes if he called. Nathan walked into the diner alone. It was a Tuesday evening. The place was half empty. Booths along the window, a counter with red stools, the smell of coffee and fried food and the specific comfort of a place that had been feeding people without judgment for decades. Nathan scanned the room. Then he stopped. In the last booth at the back, a man sat with his hands wrapped around a coffee cup looking at the door. Nathan had looked in mirrors every day of his 34 years. He had never truly seen his own face until that moment. Because the man in the booth had his face. His exact face. Same dark eyes. Same sharp jaw. Same slight tension in the brow that Nathan's ex-wife had called his permanent worried expression. Same hands around the coffee cup. Same stillness. Same way of occupying space as if he was always slightly ready to move. Nathan walked to the booth and sat down. For a long moment neither of them spoke. The waitress came and filled Nathan's cup without being asked. They both watched her leave. Then Eli said, "You're taller than I expected." Nathan said, "We're the same height." "I know. I just didn't expect it." Nathan looked at his brother across the table. His brother. The word felt enormous and impossible and completely real all at once. "How long have you known?" Nathan asked. "About you specifically?" Eli said. 8 months. "About having a twin?" "Since I was 19. I found the intake records." "Why didn't you?" "Find you?" Eli's expression didn't change. "I found you." I watched you. I needed to understand who you were before I decided whether to make contact.
And who am I?
Eli looked at him steadily.
An honest man, he said.
Which made everything more complicated.
Nathan wrapped both hands around his coffee cup.
You have to stop, he said.
I know.
There are 2 names left on whatever list you're working from.
Eli said nothing.
I've identified them, Nathan said. Margaret Osei, former regional director of foster services, and Judge Calvin Pratt, who dismissed 14 separate abuse complaints against Hargrove House over 9 years.
Eli's jaw tightened slightly.
They destroyed children, he said quietly.
I know.
They destroyed. He stopped. They took children who had nothing and no one, and they used them and buried what happened and collected their salaries and their awards and their retirement packages, and not one of them spent a single day being held responsible.
I know, Nathan said again.
Then how can you sit there and tell me to stop?
Nathan looked at his brother. Because I was one of those children too, he said quietly.
The diner was very still around them. Eli stared at him. You were in Harlow County System, Nathan continued. I was in Harlow County System. We came from the same place, Eli. The only difference between us is the address we were sent to.
Something moved across Eli's face.
Something raw and old and deeply buried.
You got lucky, Eli said.
Yes, Nathan said.
I did.
And you didn't. And that is not justice, and it is not fair, and I have known that since the moment I understood what happened at Hargrove House.
He leaned forward.
But this is not justice either. What you've done is not justice.
Then what is it?
It's grief, Nathan said.
It's grief with nowhere else to go.
The words landed between them. Eli looked down at his coffee cup.
His hands, their hands, were very still. The children in the photographs, Nathan said.
The ones you leave at every scene. Eli didn't respond. Tell me about them. A long silence. Then Eli said, Room 7 at Hargrove House held 8 children when I was there. Over 4 years. 3 of them didn't make it out. His voice was completely flat. I kept their photographs. I kept records of everything that happened to them. Everything I witnessed. Everything I couldn't stop.
He looked up.
The adults on my list signed off on it. Every single one of them. They knew and they chose to look away, and those children paid for that choice with everything they had.
Nathan held his brother's gaze.
I believe you, he said. Eli blinked, as if he had not expected that. I believe every word, Nathan said. And I have spent 3 years building a case that proves it. Not just against Hargrove House. Against the entire network of people who protected it. Osei, Pratt, 3 others still in positions of power. He reached into his jacket and placed a thick folded document on the table between them. The State Attorney General has been working with my division for 7 months. This is a sealed indictment. 14 counts across 6 individuals. It goes public in 11 days. Eli stared at the document. He did not touch it. Osei and Pratt are on it, Nathan said. They will be arrested. They will stand trial. The evidence is solid. It will hold. Trials don't always mean justice, Eli said. No, Nathan agreed. But they mean something. They mean the record exists. They mean it is public. They mean those children are on record as having existed and having mattered. Eli was very quiet. The children in your photographs, Nathan said. If you go through with this, if you're arrested or killed before that indictment goes public, their names get buried in your case file. They become a footnote in a serial killer investigation. Their story becomes about you. He watched his brother absorb that. But if you stop now, if you come forward and give your testimony, their names go into that indictment. Their story becomes the case. The whole case. Nathan's voice dropped. They become the reason 14 people go to prison. The diner hummed quietly around them. A couple at the counter laughed about something. The coffee machine hissed. Outside, the evening had gone fully dark. Eli looked at the sealed indictment on the table between them. Then he looked at Nathan. You came here to arrest me, he said. I came here to talk to my brother, Nathan said. What happens after that is up to you. Another long silence. Then Eli reached across the table. Not for the document. He placed his hand flat on the table between them. His scarred fisherman's hands. His rope-burned hands. His hands that had grown up with nothing and no one and built themselves into instruments of something he had called justice and Nathan had called grief. Nathan looked at his brother's hand. Then he placed his own hand beside it. Same hands. Different roads. Same beginning. Eli Voss turned himself in 3 days later. Not to Harlow CID. Not to the State Attorney General. He walked into a small police station in Beckett at 9 a.m. on a Thursday morning, sat down across from the desk sergeant, and said, "My name is Eli Voss. I need to speak to someone about the Hargrove House case." He carried with him a flash drive containing 4 years of documented evidence. Photographs, dates, names, witness accounts he had gathered from former Hargrove House residents across 6 states. Medical records he had obtained through means no one asked him too carefully to explain. It was the most comprehensive private investigation into institutional child abuse the state had ever seen. The desk sergeant had stared at him for a long moment, then picked up the phone. The indictment went public 8 days later. Margaret Osei was arrested at her home at 6 a.m. on a Wednesday. Judge Calvin Pratt was arrested leaving his golf club on a Thursday afternoon. 12 others were arrested across 3 states over the following week. The Hargrove House case broke nationally. Every major news organization ran the story. And at the center of it, the testimony that cracked the entire network open, was a man named Eli Voss who had spent 4 years in room 7 of a facility that should never have been allowed to exist and had spent the 30 years after that making sure someone eventually knew it. Nathan sat in the courthouse gallery on the first day of hearings and watched his brother take the stand. Eli was composed, precise, devastating. He spoke without emotion and with total clarity about everything he had witnessed. Every child, every date, every adult who had signed their name to documents they knew were lies. The courtroom was silent in a way that rooms are only silent when something true and terrible is being said inside them. Nathan watched the faces of the people in the gallery. Journalists, advocates, former foster children now grown into adults who had driven from other cities to sit in that room and hear someone finally say it out loud. Some of them were crying. Some of them were not. But all of them were listening with the full weight of people who had waited a very long time to be believed. Eli Voss was charged with 6 counts of murder in the 2nd degree. He pleaded guilty. His attorney argued, and the court ultimately accepted, that his cooperation, his testimony, and the evidence he provided had directly resulted in the prosecution of 14 individuals responsible for the systematic abuse of over 60 children across a 12-year period. He was sentenced to 22 years. He would be eligible for parole in 12. Nathan attended every day of the sentencing hearing. On the last day, as Eli was being led from the courtroom, he turned and found Nathan in the gallery. They looked at each other across the room, no words. There were no words adequate for 34 years of separation and the strange violent road that had finally brought them to the same place. But Nathan nodded, and Eli nodded back. And that was enough. Nathan drove back to Harlow City alone that evening. The highway was dark and empty, and the radio played something he did not listen to. He thought about 2 infants on a cold February morning. 2 boys placed in different hands by a mother whose name he still did not know. One sent to a family that gave him a badge and a career and the tools to build a life from order and law. One sent to a place that took everything it could and left behind a wound that had never healed and a rage that had nowhere to go but forward. Nathan thought about what he had said in the diner. The only difference between us is the address we were sent to. He believed that. He believed it completely. And it was the most frightening thing he knew, because it meant that justice, real justice, was not just about the people who did terrible things. It was about the systems that made terrible things inevitable. The addresses children were sent to, the rooms they were put in, the adults who signed their names and looked away. Nathan pulled off the highway and sat in his car in the dark for a long time. Then he took out his phone and opened a new document. At the top he typed 4 words. What we left behind. He stared at the title for a moment. Then he began to write. Not a case file. Not a report. A record. Of 2 boys. One cold February morning. And everything that came after. Because some stories deserve to be told completely. And because the children in those photographs deserve to be more than footnotes. They deserve to be the whole story. Every word of it. And that is the story of 2 brothers. One hunter. One hunted. Two lives built from the same beginning, shaped by nothing more than the address they were sent to. If this story moved you, if it made you think, made you feel, made you sit with something uncomfortable and real, then please like this video. Leave a comment telling me which moment hit you the hardest. And if you are not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Every story on this channel is crafted to pull you in and never let go. New stories drop regularly, so subscribe and hit that notification bell so you are always first in line. Until next time, stay curious, stay sharp, and never stop asking questions. See you in the next one.